Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Fantasy 420, where today we are going to return to the baseball diamond and discuss some Week 1 midweek fantasy baseball free agent starting pitchers that could be very useful to your fantasy team in this baseball season. With baseball season just beginning and some important first and second starts happening in starting pitchers, I think we need to highlight a few very important performances and people who are widely available in many leagues. There are lots of great back-end rotation starters with their first starts of the year, or there's some repeat awesome starts from pitchers we weren't sure about going into the season, and those would be foolish to ignore, especially if we took some late round flyers on some pitchers in drafts which we aren't really tied down to. So the four names I'm going to be talking about are all 50% or less owned in Yahoo leagues, so widely available, and you could add them to your team most likely. So the first name we're going to talk about is Zach Eflin, who's 31% owned for the Philadelphia Phillies. He's a 24-year-old big-bodied number 4 starter for this already dangerous Philadelphia Phillies team and offense. Last season, he was just below 1 strikeout per innings pitched and had a great first start on Tuesday versus Max Scherzer in Bryce Harper's return to Washington. And while we don't like to go too crazy over early season starts, that's about as meaningful as it gets. The tensions were really high. It was a high emotion game, and he got the best of one of the best starting pitchers in the baseball. So he ended up with the win, pitched 5 innings, got 9 strikeouts, which is well above the 1 strikeout per inning pitch total we like to look for, gave up no runs, and had a 0.8 whip, which is really good numbers. He was a decent streamer already last year, and he could have leveled up in the offseason in terms of confidence with the franchise, as well as we already know the offense did. So it might be time to buy into him already. The next name we're going to look at is Matt Shoemaker. He's 36% owned and plays for the Toronto Blue Jays. On the other hand, he is a 32-year-old, so a little bit more of a veteran, and he spent 5 seasons with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Such a ridiculous name, but when healthy, he showed promise, and he signed in Toronto in the offseason, and he was immediately thrust in the number 2 role. They gave him a lot of confidence with that, and he has gotten 2 easy teams to start off with, so we shouldn't go too crazy, but he's been spectacular and nothing short of that. So against Detroit and Baltimore, he ended up with wins in both of the games, pitched 14 innings and gave 15 strikeouts, so about where we like to see with that. But no earned runs through 14 innings is absolutely really good. Also, 0.5 whip is insane. So next start, he's going to have a big test, which is at Boston. But you may have to add him now preemptively, because if he has that third start against the Red Sox, there's probably going to be no way you're going to get him. And there's going to be a lot of people who scramble to pick him up before the start. So you might want to pick him up right after this video, because he's going to need to be a big part of that franchise if they're going to succeed this year. And the change of scenery might be just what he needed. So you might have to buy into him now, and I really like him as an early round pickup. So the next name we'll look at is Matthew Boyd, 43% owned pitcher for the Detroit Tigers. He had a brilliant start versus the Yankees on Wednesday. Even though he gave up some runs in his first start, he still ended up with a lot of strikeouts. Strikeouts are obviously insanely important in fantasy baseball. We like to have the 1-to-1 ratio, and it obviously provides the pitcher with not only a category that he can win on its own, but he also keeps the ball out of play. And there's just so many reasons why strikeouts are insanely important. So while in the 2 starts he combined for 1 loss, that's a little bit concerning just because the offense isn't very good. So he might not be able to rack up the wins. But in the 11 innings he pitched, and sorry about the train, but he racked up 23 strikeouts during that time. 3.18 earned run average is a little bit easy to swallow when you're getting those strikeouts, and a 1.24 whip isn't bad either. Obviously, 2 strikeouts per innings pitched is a little bit unsustainable, and we expect that to go down. But if he saw a level up in the offseason and he's pitching at a high strikeout rate during that clip, he's an ad, and he's worth it in pretty much any league, especially if you're going to do a points-based league where they give you a lot of points, draft.com. If you're going to look to get a starting pitcher at a discount and not have to dip into one of those first-picked guys, I'd look into Matt Boyd. The last name we'll look into today is Freddie Peralta, 41% owned for the Milwaukee Brewers. He showed great promise last year as a 22-year-old, brought up really early. He had a positive win-loss ratio, and he had more strikeouts per innings pitched, which is really good for being so young. And the Brewers gave him a second starter role going into the season. Got rocked in his first game against St. Louis, and St. Louis is a really good team, but had a huge bounce-back game against the Reds. Picked up the win, got 8 innings pitched, 11 strikeouts, which is obviously really good, 0 earned runs, and 0.25 whip. This is a really talented offense and a really good personal talent. And he's young, so he will be prone to some poor outings. But if he keeps it under control with the offense and the young talent upside, I just think he needs to be a lot more owned than this. I think he's a player that you should buy into in a lot of leagues, no matter the size, and I would look to add him. So while these are 4 names I would definitely look to add, remember not to overreact, but more or less weigh where you pick someone in the draft and your devastation level, to where if you drop them from one of these names and they didn't show the promise that we talked about in the video, weigh that towards if you drop the player and they did show that form, how mad would you be in comparatively speaking. So baseball is an extremely long season, and the higher the value you give up on, the more certain you have to be, because there's a big chance that those players, especially the more talent they have, they could bounce back. Think of Paul Goldschmidt last year when he struggled for 1.5 to 2 months and then returned first or second round value when the season was over. So the more talent you invested in during the draft, the more sure you have to be when you cut bait. But that being said, early indications are still really important. These first starts could give us a glimpse of somebody who's going to return a lot of value in the season. And you got to do what you got to do when it all comes down to it. I have some stock in these guys in all my leagues with these early pickups and dumping some of these late round flyers or position players that I gave up on. So do what you got to do. Pick up some of these guys and move forward with some good starting pitchers. I'll leave you a link to my previous free agency video where I discussed a couple more guys and also some position players. And I look forward to talking to you tomorrow with another video. Have a great afternoon, and I'll see you then. Peace.